Please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
The Parliament, after 5 long years of waiting, finally passed the amendments to the Prevention of Corruption Act. The original act was passed in 1988 and was widely recognized as too sweeping in its ambit, especially when decisions taken by public servants go bad due to later developments. The new amendments give public servants two kinds of safeguards. One, the public servant or banker should have fraudulently misappropriated property or have assets vastly disproportionate to his known sources of income. And two, any investigation of a public servant can only be done after taking permission from a competent authority. This latter rule is also to prevent summary arrests of, say, bankers, as was recently seen in the Bank of Maharashtra case. Further, the Act has also been amended to say that the taker and the giver of bribes are guilty, unless the giver reports within 7 days that he was forced to pay a bribe. But the key question we are asking today is the former. Has the law been amended sufficiently to protect civil servants and bankers who take commercial decisions in good faith? Joining me now are Mr. R. Gopalan, former Finance Secretary, Sandeep Parekh, lawyer and promoter of FinSec Law Advisors, also former SEBI member, Nilang Desai of AZB and Partners, M.R. Madhavan, founder and president, Parliamentary Research Society. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me. Well, first, let me come to the lawyer. Nilang, you know, the problem that bankers and civil servants faced is that under the Prevention of Corruption Act, if you caused any damage to public, if you caused a public loss, you can be arrested and there can be a criminal offence registered against you. Irrespective of the fact that you didn't make any money on it, you took a commercial decision and public loss was caused because the loan went bad for various reasons. Do you think that the amendments sufficiently protect a banker and say that he will be arrested only if he took a decision by taking a bribe or for personal end? Is he protected from sound commercial decisions that go bad later?
Well, I think that's certainly the intention of the amendments. And if you look at the definition of criminal misconduct before and after, it's a significant narrowing down of what criminal misconduct now means. So yes, I do think the intention is to focus on a public servant who has done something wrong and done something wrong in a manner which benefits him. Either because he has enriched himself or because property under his control has moved to someone who he favors. And I think that's certainly a much expected and a happy step forward for a public servant.
Okay. Sandeep, let me toss the same thing to you. Are you satisfied that a banker will not be charge-sheeted simply because he has caused damage to the bank? Like, for instance, you know, the PNB case where a huge fraud has been perpetrated, but clearly none of the bank chairmen or officers, or at least the bank chairmen were, were not guilty of bribes, at least not so far.
They are not restricting themselves to misconduct and disproportionate assets. That's in addition to bribe taking, which is a separate offense. So there's no dilution of accepting of bribes as an offense. Secondly, I think this will have certainly some beneficial impact, because ultimately, in the name of corruption, we don't want all economic activity to stop, which is what is already happening in banking. Public sector banks have kind of started restricting the number of loans they're giving out, because you can never be challenged for not doing anything at all. If you don't sign any files at all, I think you're completely safe all your life as a bureaucrat. So I think this is to help honest people, and ultimately, the whole process of taking it through, let's say, a politician or a lokpal itself is a very formal process. It's not as if some grant of charity would be given by a minister trying to protect a bureaucrat. So I think this will this puts in an additional process so that people are able to take, are able to kind of make decisions, some of which may be mistaken, some of which may not be great decisions in hindsight, but were appropriate decisions with the limited facts they had at that point of time. So I think it's a good thing they've introduced, and hopefully we'll have balancing between corruption and, as you've seen, there are many expansions which they've done. They've introduced abatement. Yes. They've introduced giving of bribes as an offense. Sure. They've expanded various other things like commercial bribery. So I think there's a significant expansion as well.
Okay. Well, I'll just come to the expansions and ask you to elaborate on them. But at the moment, I first want to know whether the case is at least made that banking decisions or commercial decisions taken by civil servants in good faith are not challenged on hindsight. Madhavan, do you say at least that is secure? For instance, 15 bankers in IDBI plus 3 independent directors who perhaps were not at all involved in the giving of a loan to Aircel were, charge-sheeted on grounds that Reserve Bank rules of giving the loan were not followed. And later on, of course, that loan also went bad. So purely on grounds of damage to public property or causing public loss, they were charge-sheeted. That's not possible henceforth, Madhavan?
Looks like that, because the key part is criminal misconduct included that if somebody obtains for any person any valuable thing or pecuniary advantage without any public interest. So that particular clause is gone, under which a lot of these things are happening. So, so possibly that's, we'll have to see how it plays out, but it looks like decisions taken in good faith, where the person does not gain any pecuniary advantage, should not be considered either criminal misconduct or corruption in the sense of bribe taking.
Okay. Well, the person actually here who must have taken commercial decisions in various capacities is Mr. Gopalan. Do you think the changes sufficiently protect a public servant, a civil servant and a banker?
I think so. By far, it does really provide a good amount of help or good amount of backstop for a public servant in discharging his duties in a legitimate manner. Okay. I think he need not have to feel disheartened or be afraid of taking decisions. Okay. I think overall this is a good way forward on the problems which we have been talking of for quite a long time on the financial sector, and most also in the government sector, PSUs and those kind of issues as well. Okay,
well, Sandeep, just to make that case foolproof now, there were two big cases in front of us. In the Aircel case, in which some 18 people, 15 former bankers and 3 independent directors were arrested, charge-sheeted, not arrested, but charge-sheeted. There was no instance at all of pecuniary gain or misappropriation that the charge sheet had. So cases like this, they were hauled up only because they had caused a damage of, a bad loan of 500 crore. In such a case, they are clearly protected. Is that foolproof?
Again, I would not like to comment on the Aircel case because I don't know the full facts. But yes, I mean, as I said, loans, typically public sector banks give loans, and even in good loans, overall, on a portfolio basis, 3 to 5% would be lost in any given period of time. What we've seen is obviously astronomical numbers of the past few years. But if those loans go bad, and some of them will, let's assume that 10% of those bad loans, and maybe political patronage, which is often the case, I think those cases would still not be protected. And if there's indeed some kind of quid pro quo or some kind of corruption, only then people should be worried. Okay. So I think hopefully the problems we're seeing over the past few months in terms of lending virtually coming to a grinding halt with public sector banks. So hopefully, that process will find its way out. Okay,
but Nilang Desai, I mean, I'm only persisting with this. For instance, very glaringly in the Punjab National Bank case, I wouldn't assume that from 2011 to 2018, 7 years, a fraud was perpetrated in one branch, the chairman of those days may be guilty of act of omission in the sense that, maybe they should have checked, but clearly not error of commission or bribes. So in these cases, they cannot be arrested or charge sheeted. Is that now fairly secure?
That seems to be the case. That's
correct.
Right. Yes.
Okay. Okay, Nilang, now let me come to the other very interesting safeguard, if you please. Prior approval for investigation. Is that going too far? I mean, one understands that in the Bank of Maharashtra case, the managing director and former chairman and managing director were arrested by the police, purely on charges of a builder defrauding his depositors. But, prior approval even for investigation? Or do you think it should have been prior approval for arrest or charge sheeting? Has the law gone too far? Nilang?
Well, I think there was already language which said that, for factual arrest, you seek the approval. Honestly, I don't think it's gone too far, because it's not like the competent authority is going to be unreasonable or is going to be in a position where they're going to have the facts on hand, which clearly show that there's a problem, and still block the prosecution, because these guys will need to act reasonably. Otherwise, investigation can start against them as well. Okay.
Fair enough. What would you say, Mr. Madhavan? You think justified?
No, I don't agree with that. I'll tell you why. It says no police officer shall conduct any inquiry or investigation into any offense, without prior sanction. Now, I can understand prior sanction for prosecutions required to protect a public servant, and one good thing they have done in this is they have extended it to retired officers, because otherwise you might have taken an action, then you retire and you lose the protection. Okay. So they have kept that, which is a good thing, they have added that. But on what basis, without some sort of an inquiry or an investigation, on what basis is the competent authority going to give sanction or deny sanction? I mean, they need to have some evidence which they have to see to judge whether one should go forward or not. Is there a prima facie case for going forward or not? On what basis are they going to do if there's not even investigation?
Okay, well,
that's
we have a lawyer with us, Madhavan. We have a lawyer with us. Yes, but go ahead.
Let me add one point.
Yeah.
In the case where the 6A of the CBI Act was struck down, the Supreme Court actually has a full paragraph in the middle of the case where they have said if you have prior sanction for investigation, I mean, they've actually said that one should not have it. So it's not part of the final order, but that's there in the obiter of the judgment.
Okay. Sandeep, what would you say? You think that even for investigation, having competent authorities' permission is going too far? Only for prosecution, such a permission should be sought?
So, Lata, that's a tough one, really. And I think that's a call that the government has taken and now the parliament has taken in terms of do you want to kind of penalize hindsight mistakes versus, the argument which he just said that, why do you want to stop it at such an initial stage? And I mean, if I were to support it, I would support the current legislation, because I think it will allow bureaucrats and bankers to actually start working again. So I think they've been so scared that they genuinely feel that they're going to be, prosecuted for no fault of that. And having worked in the public sector earlier, I can certify that people are indeed concerned about taking any action before doing. If after 5 or 10 years, it may look awkward or wrong.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think it is a big malaise which will actually hold back the economy. So it's a tough call. I mean, I'm not disagreeing.
Let me get the last word on this.
There are two perspectives.
And let me get the last word on this only from Mr. Gopalan. Everybody agrees that the permission of the competent authority should be taken for prosecution. But Madhavan is raising the point, should you even take permission for investigation? Should a police officer have to take permission even for an inquiry? Mr. Gopalan, did the IAS officers smuggle in this line, or do you think it is a required protection?
Well, Lata, these days there are vexatious complaints which come into if you discharge your duties properly, and if you offend when you discharge your duties properly, There are any number of people who are able to file complaints, any number of people who want to detract attention from whatever is going on the other side by filing complaints on this side.
Okay.
There are a lot of things which are going on, and that demotivates the government functionaries from proceeding with their work. You have to look at your back, front, everywhere before you are able to take any decision. I think that is delaying decisions to a considerable extent. I believe that this is a good thing, and obviously some pattern must set in where vexatious complaints which come in unnecessarily because somebody has taken some action. Now those kind of things government should be in a position to kind of filter.
Okay.
Now if there is prima facie some evidence, if it is there, I don't think government is going to refuse conduct of further inquiry, because their reputation is also at stake.
Okay.
And I think some amount of accountability will be involved in this, through a CVC mechanism in this, and I think it will be transparent.
Okay.
And therefore government cannot be wanting to or will be willing to withhold the going on of further inquiry into a particular process.
Okay.
There may be misuse in a couple of cases, I do concede, but that will be political.
Okay.
And I think in a larger interest we should accept that this is the best thing that is put forward by the government.
All right, point extremely well argued, I would say. We have to take a break, and then I want to discuss that other interesting point, that the bribe giver will also be, could also be penalized and is guilty of criminal offence. Back in a minute after a very short break. Welcome back. We are discussing the fine print of the amendments to the Prevention of Corruption Act. The amendments were just passed by the Lok Sabha earlier this week. They were passed by the Rajya Sabha much earlier in 2016. I have been speaking with former DEA Secretary R. Gopalan, Sandeep Parekh, lawyer and former SEBI member, Nilang Desai of AZB, and M.R. Madhavan, founder and president, Parliamentary Research Society. Well, the new law also says that giving of a bribe is equally a criminal offence, and only a person compelled to give a bribe cannot be arrested or cannot be proceeded against, but he has to prove that by filing a complaint that he was compelled to give a bribe within 7 days. Once again, Mr. Madhavan, is this workable at all? You know, often people are giving bribes probably at a railway station or probably to a policeman, you know, just forced because you can't be delayed beyond a point. You probably have to catch a flight. Do you think it can always be complaint registered?
Yeah, so this is problematic to me in the sense they haven't distinguished between the two types of bribes. So there is a collusive bribe where you're giving the bribe to gain some benefit for yourself. And there is the other bribe which is called coercive bribe, where you are, I mean, it's your right to get something, but the government officer is not giving it and is forcing you to give a bribe. I mean, you're not happy giving the bribe, it's your right. Now there, they are saying you have to complain within 7 days. Is that really practical? I mean, I would doubt it. And I'll add one more interesting thing. They have deleted a particular section which said that if you were, earlier it was abetment, it was not a direct offense. But they have, earlier the original act before the amendment had a section which said that if during the trial, if you were providing evidence and in the evidence you said that you had given a bribe, then you can't be prosecuted for that. They have removed that. So it completely removes any incentive I have to testify against an officer who has taken a bribe from me. It has not complained within 7 days.
Sandeep Parekh?
How are you going to convict guys? How are you going to convict guys?
Sandeep Parekh, your thoughts?
Yes, I agree. I mean, majority, you know, vast bulk of majority of bribes that we see in India are not at, you know, very high levels. They are the ordinary bribes. Ordinary people pay for simple things like getting an electricity connection, you know, maybe violating traffic signal. You know, those are the kind of things which are overwhelming in numbers. So if the protection goes away in terms of they're being prosecuted at the same time, I think I would not agree with what the bill seeks to do. I think it would be too harsh on the bribe giver, because most of the times it's kind of coercive, numerically, I would say.
Okay.
And yes.
Okay.
And therefore, you know, yeah.
Yeah, there's a bit of an overreach here, perhaps. Well, completely out of time. Nilang Desai, last word on this.
I'm going to differ just a little bit over here, because if you think about it, it's really difficult for a draftsman, for a parliament to say, I'm okay with my citizen being asked to give a bribe and saying, yeah, it's okay, I need to, get home quicker, and I've got the signal, so I'm going to pay. I think as a matter of principle, I don't think it's fair to say that because you sort of, had no way out in terms of getting what you wanted, you gave a bribe, and therefore it was coercive. I wonder whether the solution lies in the courts figuring out a way to not penalize a coercive bribe giver as much as it would a collusive bribe giver.
Fair point. Actually, the courts will have a lot to say, and we will have to check whether they will interpret the law to allow public servants to take decisions in good faith, and hope that this law will protect them from being punished on hindsight. That's the main purpose of the amendments, and according to all our experts, that purpose has been served. Mr. Vadwan, Mr. Gopalan, Sandeep Parekh and Nilang Desai, thank you very much for joining me in this discussion.